Some of you may have seen this image before. Some of you may have not. This was popular on the internet a while back. It ignited a huge debate. And the question was, is this a white and gold dress, or like it's got a white dress with gold trim, or is this a blue dress with black trim? I shouldn't even have to really leave it on the screen for you to look at. You should just have a sense of what that is already. Now, the reason that I have this image up here, and the reason this became such a hot debate on the internet, is because, and this is what we're going to be talking about in this lecture, color is relative. Your perception of color is not absolute. It depends, like pretty much everything else we're talking about in this class, on your assumptions about the context. What colors you think you're seeing have to do with the context. So, what happened with this dress was it's actually and I cannot see this as anything other than a white dress with gold trim, by the way. It's just so hard for me to see it as a black and blue dress, but it is a black and blue dress. This is the actual dress. What happened was someone photographed it in this lighting situation where the image was cropped as well, so you couldn't tell what the context was. People like me who perceived the dress to be a white dress with gold trim, what we were seeing was, to me, it looked like this was someone who was like outside on a bright sunny day, but underneath the porch. So I was seeing that there was a shadow cast over the white dress, and it was making it look bluer and making the gold look more brown. What was actually happening was that it was a photograph taken at a mall, and it had a really bright light behind it into the display, so that really bright light behind it was actually washing the image out and making the blue lighter and making the black lighter. So people who were arguing that it was they were correct in seeing that it was a black and blue dress, their assumption about the context was that it was an overexposed image. My assumption was that it was an underexposed image. So based on whichever one of those two situations your brain read it as, you were going to register it as either white and gold or black and blue. And that's what we need to talk about to end our discussion about color, is color relativity. How your perception of what a color is has to do with the context it's in. So here you'll see I have this reddish color. Here I have it surrounded by a green that's not pure green, so it's desaturated and it's a complement. So that's going to make the chroma here look higher, the saturations look higher, and it's going to look more red, because the complement is going to, remember, complement's going to accentuate, so the complement of the green is going to make the red look more red, and relative to the desaturation here, this looks more saturated. This is the same red. You know, I put these together, I know what they are. I do know the absolute value because the computer program tells me. Here though, I put this again, and also this one looks warmer. Over here I put it against a pure super intense red as red can get. It's a lighter color, so it looks darker. This is warmer, so this looks cooler. This is super saturated, so this looks desaturated and more moved towards brown. So all of those things that we talked about when we're talking about the Munsell color space of hue, chroma or saturation, value, even how light or dark it is, like with value relativity, colors will be relative as well. Now I'll take that same red and I'll move it into this context. Again, we will look at this one looks warmer, so even your perception of warmth has to do with surrounding context. This one looks a little bit cooler. This one looks darker. This one looks brighter. This one looks, to me, a little bit more red. This one looks a little bit more desaturated to the grays. That's important when you're dealing with color mixing. So you want to get your colors on the paper and then probably go back and recheck them and refine them as you're working with color. You don't ever want to try and get it right out the gate. It's also the reason why I have you working on a gray mixing paper, because at least then you're seeing it from a neutral gray and you're not fighting against the white or the black in terms of perceiving value. It'll help you perceive the value a little bit better. We also have, like with value, where we had local value, we have the concept of local color. So that's just what if I asked you the color of the thing is, you would tell me. So like we're looking at Scooby-Doo here. It's like a white collar with an orange shirt and he's got blonde hair. You know, Scooby-Doo's brown. That's what we would say. Now, that's like kind of the color that you would see in daylight, and if you took away any variations in value. And you'll see this a lot in cartoons. We'll just put like, and when people talk about flesh tone, there's no such thing as flesh tone. The flesh just has all kinds of colors. But we have this overall illusion of a persistent color. And so cartoons like this Scooby-Doo one here, you would get this use of local color. Really, we're, as far as I can tell, to understand that these people are in a dark, scary library, and so the colors should be much cooler, they should be much darker. But our brain is comfortable with the idea of local values, so it makes sense of it. It should really look something more like this, where the lighting is making the colors darker. And even this Scooby-Doo image is still pretty flat local colors. They're just adding a layer of shades to everything to make them darker, but at least it looks a little bit more placed, like it's in a dark room. But our brain's perfectly capable of placing this, and we'll just assume it's in a dark room as well. So you don't always want to be stuck to the local value of the object. You want to be a little bit more attentive to the variations in color, whether it be warmer, cooler, tints, shades, things like that. With this idea of local color, we get what's called color constancy. So once we know something's blue, we will continue to see it as blue even if the absolute color is not blue at all, because we're relating it to the rest of the context. And this leads to some really bizarre things, but we really want to preserve that sense of local color just in our mind. And if you remember back to the Gestalt principles, you also have this sense of constancy of an object, like where we can turn and rotate a thing in multiple directions and still see what it is. This is like the color version of that. It's really useful to keep a persistent illusion of sameness as we're dealing with objects. Otherwise, every time the lighting changed, it would be like we're looking at an entirely new thing. So here you'll see a very bizarre example of this, proving this. If you look at these like Rubik's Cube like structures, like as soon as we see this, we're like, well, yeah, that's yellow, blue, red, green, like that, just so obvious. And then here the color, the lighting situation changes, but we still see blue, yellow, red, green. If I go in Photoshop and actually like take the actual colors here and isolate them, so you're seeing them just in isolation, not in context. This blue here, that's what color it is in isolation. Those two things are the exact same color, guaranteed. Did it on the computer. The yellow. Now the yellow you'll see is pure because it's in this overly yellow saturated. This is the red. This is the green up top. Down here, this, what you perceive as blue right here, that's what color it is. This is the yellow. This is the red. And that's the greens. So you see in this one, the blues are just really weird. They even look darker out here, right? Like it looks darker, lighter, and then when you see them down here close to each other, there's barely any changes. And then we go over to this one that's more saturated in the cooler light. You'll see that the blue is here. What you perceive as yellow and yellow are actually these colors. Like this color right here is actually that. The reds, this is the red up top, and this is the reds on the side, and then the greens here and here. Okay, so when seen more in isolation, we get closer to an absolute perception of color. Like if I had this on the whole screen and that's all you could see, you would understand that color more absolutely. But when seen in context, it reads as like a dark, pretty pure blue. That's something you really need to be aware of as you're working on your projects, that you need to get all the colors in and adjusted relative, not just to how they look on the palette, but how they're going to look next to each other. Okay, because of the way that your eyes respond to light, you also get some very bizarre optical illusions. So I want you all, I'm just going to leave this on the screen for a whole minute. I'm going to quit talking, and I just want you to stare at the middle of this flag for 1 minute. Now just keep staring at the screen, don't blink. I'm going to go ahead and change it and switch it over. And what you just saw there is an after image. The after image is the image that continues to appear in, I should say, in the brain, but technically in the eyes as well, after a period of exposure to an original image. So I had you stare at this for a long time, and what I did was I caused retinal fatigue. So I oversaturated your eyes with the colors on the screen. The rods and cones that responded to those colors and values got tired. So when I switched the screen really quick, the after image persists, but what happens is that the complementary colors, so like we have this cool green on the screen. When I flip over, then all of a sudden those green receptors are like, we get a break. And then the ones that haven't been used, the red receptors, all of a sudden seem overstimulated, and you'll get the illusion of an actual red, white, and blue colors of a flag. So you can play a lot of tricks. The perception of color just really has to do with how your brain is interpreting the signals that come to it. Also, you can really mess with the brain because we have two different sets of receptors. We have the rods and the cones. What happens is, and this is an effect called equiluminance. So if you look at all of these images on the screen there, it'll look like there's a light line or a dark line in between the red and the green. It's not. It's just two colors. There's not four colors there. Or here, it looks like it's darker on the left, lighter on the right. It's not. It's just blue against red. Here you get this weird effect where it's spinning. All of them look like electric and a little hard to look at. They're visually irritating. What's going on there is your rods, remember from when we talked about the eye, the rods only pick up value. So all of these colors, if I turn them to black and white, they're the same value. Even this blue is the same value as the red. We tend to perceive blue as darker, but this blue is tuned down to be the same amount of darkness as the red if I turned it to black and white. So all of these, if I turned them to black and white, would be pretty much the same gray. So my rods, which are tuned to see value, are telling my brain that this is all the same thing, because the rods don't see color. So they're just like, I don't know, it's all the same gray. There's nothing there. Whereas my cones, which see color, are seeing these wildly different colors. So here we're seeing complements, so we're seeing the exact opposite color. And here we're seeing really cool blues and really, warm, like reddish oranges. Same thing here. And so my cones are telling my eye, like, there are two, like, really dramatically different things in front of me. And the rods are going, no, there's nothing different at all. And the cones are saying, yes, there is. And that argument between the conflicting information coming from your eye in the visual processing parts of your brain leads to, and you can actually see the results of the argument in all of this electricity on the edges. So those sense of extra colors and vibration is your brain's inability to resolve the arguments between the conflicting information you got. Now, this can be very powerful when we're making images because you can cause paintings to vibrate. So this painting by Claude Monet, The Impression of the Sun, is very famous for having this sense of vibration as the sun is peeking through the clouds here on this foggy day. That's because it's an equiluminant painting. So the orange that he's using and the foggy desaturated blue color that he's using are the same value, and that creates the sense of vibration of like when you're out looking at sun on the water, it has that vibration. We can't actually get colors on paint to sparkle, right? It's like it's not actual light, so we can't blind you with it, but we can use this equiluminance to kind of get that same blinding effect of staring at a light source. The last thing that we need to mention when we talk about color, like with line and how we're talking about the expressiveness of line, but especially more with color, is that color can really set mood and emotion and tone and make the viewer feel something. So we're looking here at Pablo Picasso's Crouching Woman, and you can see all of the cool desaturated blues combined with the pose of the figures, really just going to convey a sense of someone having the blues, someone being depressed. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that's blue is going to feel like sad. Here we have the Archibald Motley Getting Religion from 1948. This is also really saturated in blue colors, but they're more saturated. There's these little pops of red and everything mixed in. And then just the context of the content, which is the people out there having fun. You'll see that this creates a more lively atmosphere. It's definitely has a sense of things going on, like it's fun, but there's also like it's a little bit like maybe creepy darkness going on to it. But it is different from the Picasso. And then we can look at someone like Agnes Pelton using a lot of really warm, sherbety, soothing colors. She's able to create these almost mystical, magical environments with her color combinations, combining the warms and the cools together. I would say overall it's a warm image, but there's a lot of coolness in it. So she just has these very soothing, poetic color combinations, versus someone like Philip Guston, who's just using these are reds, they're warms, reds, and pinks, but they're a little bit cool and harsh. They don't have the warmth and the glow like this. So even though it's red, it has like a gross removed coolness to it. And he's able to get, like with this picture painter in bed, something about this, to me at least. And again, this is going to be highly subjective how you respond to it. Like, just because I think this painting feels gross and nasty, maybe you'll think it feels like yummy and candy. I don't know. But everyone's going to have a reaction to paintings like this. Now, a lot of it also has to do with just the type of mark that he made. If this would have been like, if this same type of pink would have been like when we were looking at the different color combinations, like analogous and monochrome, like with Lisa Yuskevich, she was using these same types of colors, but because her painting applications more smooth and soothing, you'll get a different read. So it's not just the color, but the color in combination with the line quality, with the quality of the brush strokes and everything, is really helping influence the sense of emotion in this. So we want to start to learn to develop our own sense of color outside of those basic color schemes that we're taught. How do we use these things to convey what we want to convey? How do we feel about the colors that we're using, and how do we think we can manipulate them to make the viewers feel things as well? Because really that's the biggest thing we have in art, is that initial gut reaction to someone looking at our painting. We've got a second or two to catch their attention before they go wandering off. And the bigger we can punch them in the gut with a feeling, the more they're going to stick around for the piece. So that is the quickest overview I can give you of color. And, these assignments that we're going to be doing are trying to get you a more hands-on experience with it. But this is a rich subject matter that has a lot to do with how your brain interprets relative situations. It has a lot to do with glitches in your system, like with equiluminance. And anyone who gets interested, I would suggest that you could spend like the rest of your life getting fascinated with this.